everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 15.5 Beta 2 has been out for a few days. I've been using it full-time on my iPhone 13 Pro Max and iPad Pro and wanted to share the overall experience with you, whether or not there's bugs, what the battery life is like, and whether or not you should install it if you were thinking of trying it out. Now, I've also taken your information from the YouTube community poll to share your experience as well, where there's over 12,000 votes and 115 comments. And I'll read some of those comments at the end of the video and respond to any questions you have or any statements you're making there about the overall experience. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in that. Now, before we talk about the overall experience, I wanted to mention some new features or changes that were found since I posted the initial iOS 15.5 What's New video. And the first thing has to do with developer tools. Thanks to a user on Discord, he was able to share this with us, so I have this linked in the description if you want to check out the Discord server, but let me show you what this looks like. I mentioned this in the What's New video, but was not able to show this. And Apple has added in the developer settings, you can get those by installing Xcode, plugging in a lightning cable, and then you can actually go under settings and you'll have a developer section. Then you have a new section called throughput, run throughput test. When you go into run throughput test, you can check to run throughput tests on ping packet loss, idle ping latency, so those sorts of things. Also a throughput test on overall packet loss and upload speeds and download speeds. And then you can actually check it and see what it looks like. So this gives you an overall understanding of what your current connectivity is like and helps developers test a little bit better if maybe they need these specific features. So that's something that's new. Also in here, let me go back through my photos. These are just screenshots. If you go into Wallet, the first time you'll see enhanced fraud protection. This was sent over by Alessio, and I haven't seen this because I don't have cards with this, but it says cards with enhanced fraud protection now use information about your account, device, and location to share fraud assessments with your payment network. So you can learn more about that. Like I said, I don't have that personally, but some people are seeing that. They may have seen that in Beta 1 as well, as it was in some of the code, but I wasn't able to see it enabled. Now there's also a physical change you can see if we go into Safari and go to your share sheet. Now on the left, I have iOS 15.4.1, and where it says Find on Page, it's actually a little magnifying glass. Now it's sort of a sheet of paper with a magnifying glass. So it's a little bit different on Beta 2. So something they've updated there. There's also updates to SportsKit. Now, this is something Apple has started with Major League Baseball on Fridays, and there's also mentions in the code, or it looks like maybe we'll have updates with things such as NFL a little bit later with American football. So we could see that a little bit later. They continue to add things into the code, and again, thanks to my friend Steve Mosier for helping me find some of that. Now, also, this past week, I mentioned this already in a different video, but Apple has updated maps in Germany and Singapore. So now if you go to Singapore or Germany, you'll have the new updated 3D maps. So as you zoom in, maybe to different areas, you'll see more information, you'll have different driving directions, and so it should be updated if you live in those areas, as well as Germany, like I said. There were also new fitness challenges this week. If you're using fitness with maybe Fitness Plus or your Apple Watch, under Fitness Plus, there were updates for different things such as International Dance Day, which is on the 25th, and Earth Day, which was the other day, where you could have specific badges, new workouts, new artist spotlights, and things like that. So all of those have been updated. And then there's also new time to walk and time to run in Yosemite National Park and with Dr. Jane Goodall. So quite a few updates there. So if you're using Fitness Plus, there's quite a few updates that are live now. Now, this past week, Apple also updated the MagSafe battery pack. So MagSafe battery pack is a pretty simple battery. I've reviewed it before, done some charging tests, and this particular battery pack actually got an update that's fairly significant. So what it is it's updated to firmware version 2.7.b.0, and in order to update this, you can either put it on the back of your phone like this, and then plug it in. Typically, I recommend plugging it into the battery pack itself, and then waiting for the iPhone to update. Once it's updated, you can check the firmware by going to your settings, general, then about, scroll down, and you'll see MagSafe battery pack. You'll see this one is updated, and the reason this update is significant is it enables 7.5 watt charging. So that's something we didn't have before. It only charged at 5 watts. Now it charges at 7.5 watts. So it's a little bit of an update that's definitely worth doing if you already have one. If you're not seeing it update on your phone, I found it to be much quicker to update by plugging it into a Mac and just leaving it for a few minutes. Then it seemed to update quickly. So it looks like that's available very easily that way. Now, as far as the overall experience of iOS 15.5 Beta 2, It's been a little hit or miss depending on who you ask. Initially, after installing this, I had apps crash on me after closing them. I also have had mail showing me that there was one email and there was nothing there. So I've heard this from other people with odd issues with mail this time around also. It's working okay now, but sometimes I'll go in, it'll say one and there's just no email there. So that's something to note that I was having an issue with. I'm having a similar cellular experience as well this time around. There was no modem update, and when switching to 5G, 5G UC in different versions, you'll see now I'm on 5G UC. It seems to work okay, but sometimes it's hit or miss when switching between cell towers as I'm driving. Sometimes it drops. My music will drop if I don't have it downloaded. So that's something I've been seeing, and others have said they've had a similar experience where they've even had calls drop, and they were also using T-Mobile. So it's not a huge cause for concern as this isn't the final version, but it's definitely an issue. And if you are having issues, make sure you report them in feedback. Wi-Fi has also been a little spotty for me as well. However, I'm testing out a new router with Wi-Fi 6E, and some of the placement seems to affect that greatly. So I moved them around. It was better today, but the other day it was really spotty. Some other people have had some odd drops, but that could depend on the router you have and their placement and more. So right now it seems to be working okay, but again, it was a little spotty before where it would just drop. Now, I've had one report of focus issues on the 8 Plus with the camera on Beta 2. So after installing Beta 2, they said focusing using the camera app was a little bit difficult for them for some reason. So it just wasn't focusing properly and continues to be an issue for them. There's also an odd display issue for a few different people where the brightness could go up or down. I've actually had mine drop all the way for some reason a few different times when it's on auto brightness. Typically that doesn't happen a lot, but maybe if I go from the outdoors to indoors, sometimes it will just drop all the way down when it really should maybe drop a little bit. So there's some odd issues there as well. And there's another issue on YouTube if you're trying to stream 4K 60 HDR content. So let me show you what I mean. So if I pick a video that's in 4K 60 with HDR, you'll see we only have the option to go up to 480p. This seems to be across all iPhones at this point. However, if it's a non-60 frame per second video, meaning 30 or 24 frames per second, you can go up to 4K or 2160. So if I go to one of my HDR videos, so again, on one of my videos that's in 4K at 30 frames per second, you'll see here we have the option for 2160p HDR. And it seems like YouTube is having a problem with 60 frames per second. If I try to upload a video in 60 frames per second, it just doesn't process all the way. It won't go past 1080p. So something's up there, something's odd, and hopefully they'll fix it soon. Now, as far as the storage, I really haven't heard a whole lot of people saying it's a problem this time around. So if we go to settings, then go to iPhone storage, give it just a moment to load. That's the first time I've loaded it on the iPhone 11 since installing it. You'll see it loaded pretty quickly, and it's calculating usage down here at the bottom for system data, and it's at 4.44 gigabytes. Loading of storage seems to be nice and fast. However, some people do say that it's still taking up excessive data, but it does seem to be less this time around. iOS manages this by itself and uses it when it's available to sort of process things in the background. However, sometimes it seems to be a bit excessive, and hopefully in the future, Apple will add a way to maybe clear some of the cache data that's here so that we can free up some of that storage. But right now it seems to be fixed for most people, but just not everyone. I've also had a few reports of the phone being overly hot compared to what it was before. So the heat of the phone was quite warm for some. Now that could be a result of it just getting warmer since we're getting closer to summer at this point, but it also could be a case you're using, or it could just be hotter than before. So it depends on the environment. No one gave me their ambient temperatures when they were telling me the differences, but some people did mention that it's going to get really hot where it got warm before. So playing games and charging, you can expect it to get a little bit warm, but at this point, it shouldn't be super hot. There's quite a few things that seem to be fixed this time around as well. So overnight battery drain has been resolved for most people. I've heard this from multiple people where it seems like before it was draining very quickly. Now they don't really have any battery drain. So if you're not charging overnight, that should be fixed for you. Also, AirPods connectivity seems to be much better this time around. So let's try it out. When you have multiple devices like this, it can be a little bit hit or miss, but you'll see it connected pretty quickly. It recognized right away on my iPhone much faster than the last time, if you've seen this before. So it looks like it's much better than it was before. Now also, frequently visited sites in Safari seem to be working again. So in Safari, if you have your frequently visited sites turned on, those will show up here, and it looks like they're showing properly. As is Shazam history. I mentioned that in the initial What's New video, but if you use Shazam to listen for music or music recognition, you'll see here it has the history and it's working properly. So that's a great sign. Now, as far as overall battery life, battery has been pretty good, to the point where I haven't really paid attention to it because it's been quite good by the time I went to bed. That's much better than before, and my battery health is currently at 100%. I charge this every night and just leave it on the charger, and then when I'm driving, I put it on a wireless charger as well. So you'll see battery yesterday was 3 hours and 56 minutes of screen on time, 4 hours and 31 minutes of screen off time, and I used about 45% of my battery. That's actually pretty good compared to what we had before. Again, the day before, almost 4 hours of screen on time and 5 hours and 53 minutes of screen on time or screen off time, and I used about 40% of my battery. So I'm doing much better this time around than I was last time. So if we go back here, you'll see I was using much more battery just to get to 4 hours, over 50%. So it really depends on the day. 2 hours with beta 1, and it almost got me to 45% or 40%. So battery life has been improved overall, and Abhishek sent in his battery life. Now, if you want to send in your battery life, I need similar screenshots to this, and I'll just choose them randomly if I get a bunch of them. But this was sent in by Abhishek on an iPhone 11 Pro Max, and you'll see yesterday he had 6 hours and 48 minutes of screen on time, 48 minutes of screen off time, and used about 60% of his battery life. The day before, 6 hours and 56 minutes of screen on time. So he used only, well, about 80% of his battery life. So pretty good. It is a beta. For some people, it's going to be better than others. For me, it seems to be just fine. The overall experience on the iPad has actually been pretty solid. No issues here. It's been stable, no bugs, no crashes. However, battery life continues to be an issue. You'll see it was charged to 100% an hour ago. You can see that here. And if we take a look at the last 10 days, the day before that, an hour and 23 minutes of screen on time. The day before that, 5 hours and 20 minutes. Now, I actually had really good battery life this day where I was surprised, but since then, it's a little hit or miss depending on the day. So typically, we should be getting close to 10 hours of screen on time. I'm getting closer to 5 or 6, and most people report the same. It's just been that way for a while, and I think iPadOS needs some battery optimization. As far as performance, I've not had a single complaint about performance or lockups or freezing, so it seems to be nice and fast. And whether it be an iPhone 8 Plus, an iPhone 6S Plus, it seems to be nice and smooth and fast. As far as benchmarks go, let's take a look at the benchmarks since I ran those, and I'll just put them down side by side so you can take a look at them here. Now, before we do that, my benchmarks on my 13 Pro Max, I had 1,711 for single core, 4,704 for multi-core. If we take a look at the history, it's pretty good. It's not phenomenal. It's a little bit lower for multi-core and lower for single core, but it varies depending on when I run it. If I run it again, sometimes it could bump right back up. Typically, if we're within 100, it's going to be performing just fine. So let's again take a look at these, and I'll read these for those of you that are visually impaired and have asked me to read these. So on the left, we have the iPad Pro 12.9 from 2021 that scored 1,707 for single core, 7,194 for multi-core. On the iPhone 8 Plus, 904 for single core, 2,230 for multi-core. And then on the iPhone 11, 1,324 for single core, 3,287 for multi-core. Now that leads me to, should you install iOS 15.5 Beta 2? Well, it still has some bugs. So if you're looking to resolve an issue from iOS 15.4.1, I probably would hold off at this point. However, if you want to try out some of the features, it seems to be pretty stable overall with just a few bugs that I mentioned earlier. So if you can live with those bugs if you experience them. Not everyone has the same sort of experience. That would be great to try out, but make sure you have a backup. And also, if you're wanting to go back, you'll need a computer to do that. So just make sure you have those. Otherwise, maybe try it on a secondary device or an older device if you still have one laying around. Otherwise, maybe hold off until a public release. Now, as far as a future public release, well, I was a little bit surprised we didn't have iOS 15.4.2 this past week. However, given that they've stopped signing iOS 15.4, meaning you can no longer downgrade, Usually we'll have one within 2 to 3 weeks. That would mean maybe this coming week, maybe Monday or Tuesday, as soon as those days, we would have a public release. That will fix some bugs, maybe some security issues as well, and then we'll have iOS 15.5 Beta 3 probably the following week. Now, we don't know if we're on a bi-weekly schedule yet. Usually between Beta 2 and Beta 3, they'll switch to a single week schedule or every week schedule. Sometimes it's bi-weekly, sometimes it's not. So we could have 15.4.2 and iOS 15.5 Beta 3 this week. However, usually from Beta 2 to Beta 3, we'll have a 2-week gap, meaning it would be in the first week of May. Then we'll have subsequent betas after that, and then a final release probably around WWDC on June 6th, maybe a little bit before, and then on June 6th, we'll have iOS 16 Beta 1 along with iOS 15 betas all the way until a final release in September. Usually mid-September is when you can expect the next version. So we'll have 2 betas at the same time. That's typically what Apple does. Of course, they could change any of this, and any of the dates are subject to change, of course, if Apple runs into any issues. Now, recently I've heard a lot of news about iPadOS 16, and I have a feeling we'll know why there's an M1 chipset in certain iPads at WWDC. Maybe we'll finally get those Pro apps, and I don't have confirmation of that, but I just have this feeling maybe we'll finally see those things. Now let's take a look at some of the comments and see what you have to say. So at the time of this video, there's 12,000 votes on the poll. 15% said I'm using iOS 15.5 Beta 2. 73% said I'm on 15.4.1 or older. 2% are on iOS 14.8 or older. 1% are still on iOS 13.7 or older. And 10% are using Android. Now let's take a look at what you had to say. Jared Cardona said, I'm on iOS 15.4.1 using an iPhone 13 Pro Max. So far, it's been running fine for me. Battery life has been great. So I thought I'd just revisit iOS 15.4.1. Since most people report it's good, there are a few issues still here and there, though. Francesca Perry said, I have the beta installed on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, iPhone 7 Plus, and iPhone 6S, and all 3 devices are running perfectly well. No stutter or lag, animations are very smooth, battery is great across all 3, and no major bugs or issues, and all apps work perfectly fine. Keep up the great videos, Aaron, and have a nice weekend. And thank you. I hope you have a great weekend too. Alaska Heston says, I'm on iOS 15.5 Beta 2 on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it feels even better and more polished. Battery life looks solid. Yesterday, I left home with 71% battery, had a conference call on 5G with sudden drops to 3G due to the area where I had to use the camera for a couple of minutes. It was an hour-long conference, still used it for some GPS, podcasts, and some Facebook videos, and got back home with 64% on a lapse of almost 3 hours. Feels pretty solid, haven't experienced any bugs at the moment. And that's where I said, this needs a little bit of work still, or maybe it's just not the best yet, but it seems to be getting much, much better, and hopefully within the next few betas or so, it will be much better. Ron Leedy said, on Beta 2, I've had a few apps with glitchy displays. The display starts flashing refreshes until I quit out. So I don't know if this is something to do with ProMotion. I was thinking maybe it had to do with that, or it could just be some odd issue with maybe the brightness issue I mentioned earlier, or a combination of all of those. Sobi said, I'm on iOS 15.5 Beta 2 in the UK using the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I've been having decent battery even when connected to 5G the whole day. Connecting to AirPods Pro has been seamless, and Apple CarPlay works perfectly. Going between 4G and 5G is smooth, and no phone call drops so far. Getting about 9 to 12 hours of screen on time with 99% battery capacity. Although Snapchat may take up battery very quickly for some reason. However, I'm having problems using AirDrop when sending messages over to another device. Another bug is when I'm in a dark room, auto brightness does not work and puts it at full brightness until I turn off and on my phone. Also, it says that I'm using over 15 gigabytes on system data, but overall this update is probably the strongest build of iOS 15 since iOS 15.3. And so, like I said earlier in the video, it's very hit or miss depending on who you ask. Some people have a phenomenal experience, others just have some odd bugs here and there, and then others have really bad experiences. So it doesn't really seem to be dependent on the device. It just seems to be dependent on maybe what apps you're using, how you're using your phone, and maybe even charging your phone. Haley Wilson said, 2 problems I've encountered have been with my Apple Watch not showing what I'm watching on my iPhone. The second one is I'm not able to AirDrop one photo with being on iOS 15.5 Beta 2. Now that's a couple people mentioning issues with AirDrop. I actually see that it's fixed for me me on 15.5 Beta 2. Everything airdrops quickly. All the wallpapers in this video, I just airdropped all the different devices so I can have them on there, and it seemed to work quickly where it didn't before. So for me, thankfully, it's working fine, but again, it's going to be a different experience for different people. Clive Sinclair said, I'm seeing more bugs in iOS 15.5 Beta 2 than in the first beta. Mail notifications are not working for me all the time, and mail content is not displayed. Unless I switch off the mail and relaunch, using Outlook, all fine. So like I said, I had issues with mail myself, and others have mentioned this as well. So there's definitely an odd bug this time around, and I definitely need to report that in feedback. Dipal Gandhi said, I'm on iOS 15.5 Beta 2 on an iPhone 10, and it's much better than previous betas. AirPod issues might be resolved. So I showed that earlier. It seems to connect much better. And Martinium235 said, iOS 15.5 Beta 2, iPhone 13 Pro. One bug I noticed is the automatic backlight sometimes goes dark by mistake and stays there, similar to the issue I've been having as well. And so that's everything with iOS 15.5 Beta 2. Hopefully that helps you decide whether or not you should install it, or if you're having issues, you're probably having similar issues, at least some of them, to what others are having as well. I'm sure Beta 3 will be better, and as we get closer to the final release, typically most of these bugs just go away. However, there's always instances where some of those bugs are not resolved and they still release it to the public. So hopefully they fixed most of the issues by the time it's released. Now, if you've found anything else, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.